I'd like to take a moment to share with you what I thought was a solid conversation with a new client couple. It's my hope that what I shared with them is a help to you the way it was to them. She is 42 years old. He is 45. They have a teenage child, and they have been married for 15 years. They came to me. She brought her husband to me because she said to me that the marriage is draining her. I said, why is this a drain? She said, well, Doc, after 15 years, I've realized that my husband is incredibly needy. And the reality is I have to take the ownership of this. When I dated him, he gave signs and glimpses that he was very needy, very high maintenance. He always needed me to do something for him. And while I recognize that in partnerships, we should do things for our partners, I should never feel like I'm the one that's carrying your load. I feel like we should share loads. I should not carry your load. I said, ma'am, I don't disagree with that assessment. I said, sir, is this true? He said, well, yes, sir, it is to an extent. He said, 5 years ago, I lost my job. And when I lost my job, if I'm being honest with you, all of my motivation and confidence kind of went with it. She interjected and said, yeah, and you became lazy too. He just looked at her and said, sir, is that true? He said, I guess it depends on how you perceive it and what your perspective of laziness is. I said, well, what have you been doing for the last 5 years? I'm assuming you found a new job. He said, no, sir, I haven't been able to find anything steady. I've been kind of, looking here and there. She interjected again and said, he doesn't look as hard as he can. I said, why do you say that? She said, because most days he's typically either playing a video game or he is just laying around watching TV. He does not really make finding a job. And I don't complain about it because it's not like he has carried all the bills. Like we've been splitting the bills since we've been married. And so I'm still not only covering my part of the bills, but I'm covering the majority of the bills that he used to cover because his unemployment is in and out. And I still don't complain. I said, sir, is this true? He said, it is, sir. He said, I've lost my motivation, I believe. And I've expressed this to her, and I don't feel like she supports me in the way in which I want her to support me. I said, sir, how do you want her to support you? He said, well, I just feel like, she should just be there for me more. She should not see this as me being a bad guy or not being a good husband, but she should be there to support me and encourage me while I'm going through this transition in life. It wasn't my fault that I lost my job. The company downsized, but I just haven't been able to get anything to come through since then. I said, well, what have you been doing since then? He said, what do you mean? I said, while you've been job searching, what else have you been doing? He said, I've just been job searching. She interjected and said, sir, talking to me, Doc, this is one of the problems that I have with my husband. Again, I don't have a problem with supporting anyone, she said. She said, but I don't believe it is my responsibility to provide to him motivation. I don't believe it's my responsibility to provide to him confidence to do what it takes to get out of this rut. Yes, I understand encouragement and it has its place, but I don't believe that I am primarily responsible for that and that he should have a sense of autonomy when it comes to getting himself off the ground, especially as a man, and doing what he needs to do. I looked at her and looked at him and said, y'all, I don't disagree with nothing she just said. In fact, she's made my call a whole lot easier than what it had to be. I don't disagree. I said, but I want you all to consider something that I call healthy autonomy. And healthy autonomy, in essence, looks like showing up in a space of a relationship with a sense of healthy independence. When we look at healthy autonomy is when two people come together in a relationship, but they come into that relationship with a healthy, keen understanding of what healthy independence looks like, meaning they have the ability to stand on their own and they welcome what a person that they're connected to can add to them. They welcome it, which means it's not mandatory, it's optional. Whatever a person brings to them is something that adds to what they already possess, and it's not something that becomes a necessity. I said to them, the reason why healthy autonomy is important is because anytime you are adding something to someone's life and you begin to sense that what you're adding to their life is vital for them to live, then this creates neediness, dysfunction, and frankly, it creates desperation. He sat back in his chair, put across his arms and said, wow, I didn't look at it this way. I said, sir, your wife thinks you're desperate and your wife thinks you're needy and your wife hasn't used the word dysfunction, but I'm going to use the word dysfunction because you are showing up in this space, relying on her to give you things that you should already be giving yourself. She said, Doc, this is all I've been trying to explain. And he cannot say that I've been whining about it. I haven't been nagging him. I haven't done what a lot of women would do in my position. I've kept my head down and really gone to work and continued to do the things necessary to keep the house afloat. She said, but I'm not going to lie to you. Even being around him, being intimate with him, it's starting to just turn me off because I don't see a motivated man doing what it takes to dig himself out of a ditch with a strong woman next to him who is doing more than her share. I said, ma'am, you're not wrong. I said, this dysfunction that you are describing is coming from a man who showed up and his cup wasn't already full. I said, let me give you guys a very easy analogy to understand with this. You don't see this a lot unless you are into China or Chinaware or things like that. I am. And when I drink out of mugs, I put saucers under them. And the reason why I put the saucers under them is because those saucers are typically designed to catch the overflow of whatever's in your mug. I said, but when two people come together in a relationship, they both show up as cups. Now, when they both show up as cups, the goal should be for them to be as full as a cup as they can be. Why? Because if both people come up full as full cups and they're pouring into one another, I said to them, I said, where's the excess going to go? He said, it's going to go into the saucer. I said, why, sir? He said, because if the cup is already full, it can't take more. And everything that's poured into it is going to overflow into the saucer. I said, sir, that's how we show up in relationships. And if you don't show up in a relationship full, your goal is to work to get as full as you can, as fast as you can. Why? So that when your wife is pouring into you, she's pouring into your overflow and not your necessity. I said, sir, the reason why your wife is so turned off is not necessarily because you're a bad guy. I said, there is a lack of awareness here. I said, but your wife is pouring from her cup into your empty cup and it's emptying her out. And you're sitting there with a dry saucer. Why? You're not doing the things necessary to build your own motivation. You're not doing the things necessary to build your own drive. You're not doing the things necessary to build your own confidence. And when this happens over time, you come across as needy and you come across as desperate. You're asking for her to pour more into you when the cup is already almost empty by itself. And by the time, sir, she continues to pour things into you, she's not going to have anything else to give. And you're going to be walking around with a somewhat full cup, but still not productive because you're not doing anything with what's in the cup. She said, Doc, this is literally all I've been trying to describe. And I have not been able to put it that way. And you put it perfectly. That the reason why his very presence is starting to drain me is not because I don't love him, but it's because I'm pouring everything into him. And it has him with more in his cup, it seems like, than I have in mine, but his cup is really shallow because he's not doing anything with it. I said, that's exactly the plight of a shallow cup in an empty saucer. That when people are walking around with a cup that is not being utilized and they depend on other people to fill their cup, what ends up happening is they walk around with this false pretense of support. And this false pretense of support allows them to think that they're okay living as they are, but it's really shallow because they're being poured into by somebody who really needs what they're pouring, but is also telling you when they pour, you ought to be doing this on your own. I said, sir, if you would just get your cup full yourself, work to build your own confidence and motivation. I said, you're walking around watching TV every day and you're not applying to as many jobs as you need to and really starting a business or doing other things. I said, sir, there is nothing more needy and desperate than an unmotivated man. Than a man that is down. It's one thing to be down, but a man that is down and does not find the strength to get himself up off the floor, especially when that man has a wife and a family that he is responsible for. I said, sir, you're going to have to do something to pour something into your own cup because she's pouring. But right now you're coming across really needy and really desperate. Because here you are with a shallow cup because you got something in it. But the only reason you have what you have in your cup is because she gave it to you. What she's pouring into you should actually be overflowing into your saucer so that you can pour back into her and you guys don't build a bridge of resentment because you're trying to function with shallow cups. He was very thankful on the call, very thankful, very appreciative. He said that was a way that helped him to realize his shortcomings in a different way. And as a result, he set up some individual sessions for us to work together. And we've got a session coming up here in a couple of weeks. And I believe he's going to be okay. I think he has now seen exercise of self-awareness to realize that you can't show up as a shallow cup and expect a full saucer. I hope this story made sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you.